Lads and lasses, welcome to episode number 2 of the Conversation Junkie podcast, the soon to be number one podcast in India. If you haven't checked out episode 1, definitely do so. I had a beaut of a conversation with the lovely, gorgeous, sexy Shweta Subaiya. According to me, the sexiest fitness trainer there is in India. I recorded that about 3 months back. It's on the channel, and you'll also find the description. You'll also find the link to that episode in the description. So, at the very outset of this episode, I'll give you an overview of everything that I'm going to be covering. And look, if that piques your interest and/or you're turned on by the way I look or the way I speak, then I'd love for you to give me company. But look, if you've got better things to do, then I'll totally understand. Sometimes having a wank is the need of the hour, unless you want to get the best of both worlds and have a wank while you're watching this or while you're listening to this podcast episode. In which case, I promise I will not be disgusted. If anything, I'm going to be flattered. Anyway, enough dilly dallying. Coming to the overview of what I'll be discussing in this episode. So, on some of my recent videos, when I say recent videos, the ones I uploaded 2 or 3 months back, because in the recent past, it's been fairly barren on my channel. One of the comments that I've been getting has been, why have you deleted all your videos? Why have you unlisted all your videos, or at least most of them? And so I've been inundated with that question. And so I'm going to be addressing that first. Then I also want to talk about my morning cardio routine, because it's been an absolute game changer for me. I'll talk to you about why I actually started this morning cardio routine and what are some of the early returns that I've actually derived from this routine based upon this experiment that I've conducted over the past week and a half. I'm also going to be taking in a question that a subscriber sent in. Beautiful question, very profound. I didn't know you guys were this profound. I'm just kidding. I'm also going to be talking about my emotional eating tendency and how I've actually improved a lot on that front, and some of the ways, or some of the ways in which I've improved. And who knows, maybe you're going through something similar as well. So sharing my experience with you might just end up helping you. I will also talk about what I'm currently reading. And lastly, we'll talk about the words that I've learned this week, because as you guys probably know already, if you guys have been followers of my channel, or if you guys look at some of the content that I put out on Instagram, I'm fascinated with words. I'm fascinated with wordplay. If anything, I enjoy wordplay a lot more than foreplay. But look, I don't look at wordplay and foreplay as independent things. Wordplay, or beautiful wordplay, can lead to foreplay, if you know what I mean. But before we get to these topics, tell me what you make of the name of the podcast, The Conversation Junkie. I think it describes me well, but you let me know what your opinions are. So I recently put out a poll on YouTube as well as on Instagram asking you guys, which of the two names do you guys think is a better description of who I am as a person? And the two options, दो विकल्प जो मैंने दिए थे, were The Conversation Junkie and The Frivolous Geek. The Conversation Junkie and The Frivolous Geek. And an overwhelming majority of you voted for The Conversation Junkie. I think about 75 to 80% voted for The Conversation Junkie on Instagram as well as on YouTube. But I'd love for you guys to tell me what you guys make of the name of the podcast, The Conversation Junkie. Should I stick with this? Should I think about something else? And देखो, मैं तो जनता का ही आदमी हूँ. And so if you guys still feel that The Conversation Junkie is the way to go, then I'm going to memorialize this as the name of the podcast. Now, coming to the meat of this discussion, starting with the first point that I talked about in the overview. Why have I deleted all my videos, or why have I unlisted all my videos? I'll be as radically honest as possible, as transparent as possible with you guys. So when I started the channel, in hindsight, I feel that I started the channel with the wrong approach in mind. And I'll tell you why. जब मैं channel start कर रहा था, I was thinking about, okay, what are some of the topics that I can create content on? And so I had like a whole host of ideas. But then I ended up settling for the topic that I thought would be most popular, as opposed to the topic that I thought I'd be interested in creating content on. And so I thought about my background. former investment banking analyst, worked at Goldman Sachs. And I felt talking about my Goldman Sachs experiences or my investment banking experiences would definitely end up going viral on YouTube, or a lot of people would flock towards that type of content. I had started this channel in the middle of 2020. It had already been 2 years since I'd parted ways with Goldman Sachs. And so my life in the middle of 2020 was not the investment banking life. Like Goldman Sachs investment banking was the past, was history. And so creating content on a topic that wasn't representative of what my life was like in the middle of 2020, 2 years, a good 2 years after I'd parted ways with Goldman Sachs in investment banking, was probably in hindsight not the right move, because I felt, okay, I should cater to the people who are going to be watching, as opposed to thinking about, okay, Anubhav, is this actually something you'll enjoy creating content on? Look, the best intersection is, or the best case scenario is, you create content on a topic that you're passionate about and a topic that you feel can benefit the audience that's watching. So that's the best case scenario. That's the best intersection. And I think this is what I just said is beautifully summed up by a quote from Brené Brown that I came across, which is, create from a place of love, but adapt from a place of business. Create from a place of love, but adapt from a place of business. But when I first started creating, I was simply chasing the vanity metrics, is what I like to call it. The views, the subscribers, as opposed to actually listening to my inner voice, which was telling me, Anubhav, you do not enjoy creating content on this topic. Because this topic, as I said, is not a proper representation of what your current life is like. Your life in the middle of 2020. 2 years after, I'd already left New York, parted ways with Goldman Sachs, and was done with the investment banking life. But I started creating content on like the GS stuff, the IB stuff. It started doing really well, really well. And so I felt compelled to actually stick to this topic because it was doing well. But deep down, I was hating the creation process. I wasn't enjoying the creative process. And so something had to give, something had to change if I had to be sustainable with my content creation. Because you can't be sustainable with anything that you hate doing. And so I thought, okay, now let's change to a different topic. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about personality development, communication skills, other stuff that piques my interest. But naturally, there was a fairly steep drop-off in views. Because most of the people, a lion's share of the people, 90% or 95%, if not close to 100% of the people who subscribed to my channel had subscribed for the investment banking stuff. Because that's the only type of content that I was putting out. And some of those videos, like the resume that got me into investment banking, a day in the life of an investment banker at Goldman Sachs, those went viral. And those videos drew in the lion's share or the majority of the subscribers. And so I changed topics because I felt, okay, I should be doing something that actually piques my interest. And that, of course, has the byproduct of benefiting people who are going to be watching the channel. But there was a natural decline in views because I'd completely changed track. I'd pivoted to something else. But naturally, I started comparing the views that I was getting on the new videos to the views that I was getting on the Goldman Sachs videos. And the fact that I wasn't getting close to as many views on my new videos as I was getting on the GS videos or the IB videos made me feel very disheartened. It made me very crestfallen. As a result of which, I became very inconsistent with my content. results ही नहीं आ रहे. As I said, I was chasing the vanity metrics, views नहीं आ रहे, likes नहीं आ रहे. I was enjoying the process, but because I was focusing or fixated too much on the results in terms of likes, shares, subscribes, views, yada, 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 I was feeling disheartened. I should have focused more on the effort, more on the creative process, more on the journey, as opposed to just looking at the destination or the results. जैसे भगवत गीता में कहते हैं ना, I'm a lot wiser now compared to what I was back then. भगवत गीता में कहते हैं ना, you are not entitled to the fruits of your labor. You're simply entitled to your labor. And so the reason why I unlisted a lot of those videos, the GS videos, the IB videos, is because I felt that my identity as someone who's a GS guy, an investment banking expert, was really weighing me down. Because now, or even in the middle of 2020, I never looked at myself as a GS guy or an IB guy. Like, I was working as a sports presenter. I had left that life. But that identity of someone who's a GS guy or an IB guy, an identity that I myself was responsible for creating because I started creating content on GS and IB topics that went viral. That identity is something that I felt compelled to live up to, even though I wasn't enjoying it. So that's how that identity was really constricting me, was restricting me. And so psychologically, I felt that in order for me to actually discard that identity that was weighing me down, that identity as a GS guy or an IB guy, let me unlist all of those videos. Let me forget about the past. Let me begin the channel on a clean slate. And when you're beginning something from scratch or restarting something, then you have that beginner's mindset. You aren't as entitled. You don't expect all your videos to have thousands or lakhs of views because you're just starting out. You don't focus as much on the results. You focus more on the effort, the fact that you're enjoying the creative process. And so psychologically, I want to feel that way again. And I feel based upon the early returns, I am feeling that way. Like, I'm thoroughly enjoying this right now because I'm talking about things that I enjoy talking about, as opposed to feeling compelled to pacify the masses and talk about what piques their interest, but at my expense. And so, as I said, I wanted to start on a clean slate because I didn't want to carry that baggage or that weight because of that identity as a GS guy or an IB guy. But you tell me, should I bring back those videos, or if not all of those videos, maybe some of those videos? So I think there could be a way in which I can actually forget about the past, but still bring back those videos, or at least some of those videos, because a lot of you have actually reached out to me through the comment section as well as via email saying, hey Anubhav, could you please relist this particular video that really helped me out? Could you please relist that particular video that really helped me out? And so if those videos were actually helpful in terms of like the entertainment or the education or the edutainment that they were providing, I don't want to deprive people of the content that they found beneficial. So maybe I don't end up bringing back all the videos, but I can bring back some of the videos that I was proud of, or some of the videos that helped you guys a lot. But let me know if you reckon that I should do that. Now moving on to the next point that I have on my list, which is my morning cardio routine. I'll tell you about why I started this routine and how it's doing wonders for me based upon, the 1.5 weeks that I've spent doing this. I know it's not too big a sample space, 1.5 weeks, but as I said, the early returns have been very good, and long may those returns continue into the near future, the distant future as well. So I'll tell you what got me to start this routine of mine. So I'm not sure about you, but for some reason, and I still don't know what the reason is, there could be multiple reasons at play. For some reason, I feel very anxious in the morning. I have no idea why. Very, very anxious in the morning. And so even if I felt great about myself when I went off to sleep the previous night, for some reason, when I wake up in the morning, it takes me a bit of time to find my bearings. Like the first couple of hours of the day, I'm a nervous wreck. I'm anxious. Maybe I'm anxious because of the uncertainty associated with how my day will unfold. As a freelancer, there's a lot of uncertainty in your day because your day is what you make of it, right? You can actually create the day you want, but that also creates a bit of uncertainty because you have to think about how you want to spend your day every single day. It's different when you're working a full-time job, because when you're working a full-time job, typically you have like a certain certain set of tasks that you have to complete. You have like a to-do list that's often given to you by your boss, your manager. But as a freelancer, you have to put on your thinking hat. Okay, what's the best use of my time? What's the best use of my downtime? So it could be because of that. It could be because of the fact that I'm a people person, but I'm living alone by myself in a 1 BHK apartment. And so sometimes not seeing anyone around me, no humans, no animals, can create that anxiety. So as I said, it could be a whole host of reasons at play, and I'm definitely meditating or thinking more about what the reasons could be, such that I can actually plug those reasons. Or it just could be general anxiety, maybe general anxiety that a lot of people face in the morning. But anyway, that's beyond the purview of this discussion. I want to talk about what I'm doing to actually get rid of this anxiety that I'm experiencing. And so, because this anxiety became such a recurring issue, I wasn't liking it. And I felt, Anubhav, instead of actually sliding this under the rug, let's do something about it. What should I do about it? So I came across this book on anxiety after Googling, okay, best books to cure anxiety. Why do I have morning anxiety? I came across this book on anxiety called Good Anxiety by a professor whose name is Wendy Suzuki. I think she's a professor at NYU. And so I came across this book, Wendy Suzuki. I read most of the book, didn't read all of it because I got the gist after reading a few pages. And then I saw Wendy Suzuki on Andrew Huberman's podcast, and I saw the entire podcast episode. And if you guys suffer from anxiety, I definitely recommend watching Wendy Suzuki's appearance on the Huberman Lab. That's the name of Andrew Huberman's podcast. And in that, she talked about how she used to face chronic anxiety for many, many years, especially in the morning. And then she introduced something to her life that was a complete game changer. Something very simple, but it had like an outsized effect on her mood, on her life, on her work, on her well-being overall. She started doing 30 minutes of cardio every single morning. And that 30 minutes of cardio would really set the tone for her day, would give her like this feel-good factor, which would then enable her to attack the rest of the day, to tackle the rest of the day with gusto, with aplomb. And so I thought, it doesn't hurt. Let me start something like this. Because typically I work out, or I used to do my lifting either midday around, say, 12 p.m., 1 p.m., or usually like 8 times out of 10 in the evening, around 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 7:30-ish. And so I thought maybe I can start a morning cardio routine or a morning workout routine. I can't lift in the morning because my body still isn't awake, or my body is way too tight. And so it's very difficult for me to lift. I can lift in the morning, but my lifting numbers aren't as high as what my lifting numbers are like when I'm lifting later in the day, when I'm lifting in the evening. So I thought, I don't want to be lifting in the morning. Let me do cardio, similar to what Wendy Suzuki does in the morning. And for the past week and a half, I've been doing 20 minutes of cardio, sometimes 30 minutes as well, but it's in the 20 to 30 minute range. And trust me, after doing so, I'm going from feeling like $1 million Zimbabwean dollars to $1 million US dollars. It's been an absolute game changer so far. And who knows, if I continue with this routine and if it continues paying dividends, it'll go from being a game changer to a life changer. And what do I do in terms of cardio? Sometimes I go for a run, 30-minute run in the morning. But as I said, typically in the morning, my body's very stiff. My legs are very stiff. My hip flexors, that area is very stiff. So I could go for a run, but typically that entails a lot of stretching before running, like 15 minutes of mobility and flexibility and stretching before I go for a run. Only then does my body feel somewhat loose. So what I've been doing, instead of actually going through the entire process of stretching, then running, then coming back and having another stretch, which ends up taking time as well. It ends up taking like a solid 1 hour overall, including stretching and running. I've been doing 20 minutes on the bike. There's a gym in my building, and I go to that gym and do 20 minutes on the bike. That's it, 20 minutes on the bike. Not too fast, but at the same time, not too slow, because at the end of those 20 minutes, I like working up a sweat. And it's been a bloody game changer. So try it out. I'm telling you that there's a high probability that it ends up being a game changer for you as well. It'll help you set the tone for the day. And that's why I come back upstairs to my apartment feeling like $1 million, feeling great, ready to tackle the day, ready to take on all the challenges that this day will bring my way. Next on my list is a very profound question that a subscriber sent in. I absolutely loved the question, and I'm going to play it out right now.
Hello everyone, my name is Johnson. I'm from Hyderabad. I am friends with Mr. Anubhav Jain.
Wait a minute. Friends with Mr. Anubhav Jain. Johnson, speak for yourself. Mate, I'm not mates with you. I'm kidding.
A good friend he is.
Good friend. यार friend तक ठीक था. Good friend now. Good friend.
And Anubhav, my question is,
Yes.
how did you handle your extreme happy moment till date? And how did you handle your extreme sad moment till date?
Beautiful question. Actually made me think a lot. How did I handle my extreme happy moment till date? And how did I handle my extreme sad moment till date? Now, Johnson, do you want the long answer or do you want the short answer? Let's start with the short answer. So the short answer being, when I'm happy, I have a wank. When I'm sad, I have a wank. I'm kidding. I'll give you the longer, more profound answer because I think only that will do justice to how profound your question is. So I'm going to be answering this question with as much profundity as I can actually channelize. Let's tackle the happiness aspect first, and then we'll come to the sadness. To be completely transparent with you, I have moments when I experience bursts of happiness, but I'm going to be lying to you through the skin of my teeth if I said that my default state is one of happiness. Seriously. Like, I don't think my default state is one of happiness. Now that begs the question, okay, what is happiness? Like, how do you define happiness? Because it could have different meanings for different people. I actually agree with something that I came across in this book that I'm rereading at the moment, and I'll talk about this book later. It's the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. I wouldn't be surprised if many of you have heard of Naval Ravikant. My favorite practical philosopher. I've learned so much from him about life, about happiness, about wealth creation, etc., etc. In the book, Naval Ravikant beautifully describes happiness as a feeling when nothing is missing. That feeling of contentment when you feel nothing is missing. In other words, when you don't have too many desires, right? Because when you desire something, it means that that something that you're desiring is missing from your life and you want that something. That doesn't mean that you don't have any desires in life. You ought to have desires in life. That doesn't mean you just become a celibate or a monk for the rest of your life and do nothing, just meditate. I mean, if you want to do that, you could do that. But if you're living in civil society, then it's natural to have desires and okay to have desires. But Naval Ravikant says, don't have too many desires. Because, according to Buddhist philosophy as well, desire equals suffering. In other words, the more the number of desires that you actually have, the more your suffering will be. Because you'll feel as if, oh, there's so much missing from your life. Hence, I need to be desiring everything that's missing such that I can plug the hole that's created by everything that's missing in my life. So what he says is, it's okay to have desires. Have desires. But don't have too many desires. He says, have one overwhelming desire, but make peace with everything else that you feel might be missing from your life. Have one overwhelming desire and work towards that. And accept the fact that that one overwhelming desire that you have will be the axis of your suffering. Accept that. Once you accept it, then it won't create any conflict in you. It's funny, as paradoxical as it sounds, when you accept your negative emotions, it creates positive emotions. So accept the fact that that one overwhelming desire that you end up choosing for yourself will be the axis of your suffering. The other thing that I ought to mention that I learned from this book is we shouldn't conflate pleasure and happiness. Both are very, very different. Pleasure typically isn't earned. Pleasure is like cheap thrills, saste nashe. Alcohol gives you pleasure, it gives you a high, it gives you a kick. Cigarettes could do that, other hard drugs could do that, and what have you. Pleasure is like a Ferris wheel, like a Ferris wheel. It gives you a high, but then that high is followed by an inevitable and equally steep crash as well in the aftermath of the high. That's pleasure. Now, coming to how I've been dealing with extreme happy moments in my life, as Johnson put it. So, this is something that I've been doing recently, and I'll tell you who I learned this from. A couple of people who've influenced this, but let me describe what I've been doing, and then I'll talk about the two people who've influenced this as well. So, whenever there's some good news in my life, or there's some positive development in my life, or some happy moment, I acknowledge it, but I don't have a massive celebration. I'll celebrate it. I don't want to be a party pooper, but I don't like having a massive celebration. Because with a massive celebration, and I learned this from Andrew Huberman on one of his podcasts where he talks about dopamine. When you have a massive celebration, you see like a sudden spike in your dopamine, but that spike in dopamine is followed by a massive crash in your dopamine as well. That's one of the reasons why, in the aftermath of like a big milestone that you've achieved in your life, you typically have a very hollow feeling, a very empty feeling. You know, you finished a massive project that you've been working on for an inordinate amount of time. You finished a massive project, you finally submitted it, or you're finally done with it, you've published it, you feel great. But then the following day, you typically have like a very hollow feeling, an empty feeling. It's similar to how Olympic athletes feel once they're done with the Olympics. There's a term for this as well. It's called post-Olympic depression or post-Olympic blues, or it's also called gold medal depression. Think about an Olympic athlete. He or she reaches the zenith of success, the pinnacle of success, gets a gold medal at the Olympics, the biggest sporting event there is. And once that athlete comes back home after the gold medal, and once that athlete no longer gets the same adrenaline rush that he or she was getting performing in front of so many people at that bigger stage, all of a sudden that person feels like a very hollow feeling, like something's missing, something's empty. You crave that adrenaline, you crave that high. But because the athlete doesn't end up getting that high or the adrenaline rush that the athlete is craving, he or she ends up feeling a bit depressed because of the hollow feeling. That's why it's called post-Olympic blues or post-Olympic depression or gold medal depression. You go from the high of winning the gold medal to being a layman again back home. And so celebrate your good achievements, your milestones, but then don't have too big a celebration, because a massive celebration or like a massive high is also followed by a massive crash. Not to mention the fact that life is a great leveler as well. You know, whenever you're flying too high, life has this tendency to clip your wings and bring you back down whenever you might be flying too high. So things are never as good or never as bad as they seem, which is why I think it's imperative that for the most part, it's easier said than done. And I'm no saint, like I don't always follow this. For the most part, try maintaining an even keel. Even keel. That's a phrase that I came across on Lex Friedman's podcast when he was interviewing Tim Dillon. comedian Tim Dillon, the funniest guy alive, according to me. But we'll talk about Tim Dillon later. But Tim Dillon talked about how it's helped him a lot to maintain as even a keel as possible. So neither too high nor too low. That doesn't mean you're emotionless. That doesn't mean you become impassive and you feel nothing. Like, you should be feeling emotions. At the end of the day, we're humans, which means that we have emotions. Like, we have a rational brain, the forebrain or the prefrontal cortex, but we also have a hind brain, the reptilian brain, the animal brain, the emotional brain. And the emotional brain is stronger than the rational brain. We aren't rational, we're irrational, but we end up rationalizing the irrational things that we do. And I talked about this in one of my recent videos as well. So, even keel, neither too high nor too low. And I think when you reduce the volatility in terms of your emotions, both happiness as well as sadness, you'll just feel a lot more calm, a lot more at ease. Your mind won't be all over the place. So that's the happiness angle. Now let's talk about sadness. So I'm a lot different now dealing with sadness compared to what the case was earlier. So earlier, I would absolutely never open up. Never open up when something was bothering me, something was plaguing me, something was assailing me. Because I felt I'm going to be judged by my friends, by my mother, by my family members if I show weakness, if I show vulnerability. I would never ever open up. So I used to bottle everything inside me, like all the emotions. I used to bottle it. But slowly but surely, I've realized that displaying weakness or displaying vulnerability is actually a strength. I know I sound like a bloody Mel Robbins or a Jay Shetty right now, but displaying weakness, displaying vulnerability is actually a strength. So sometimes you ought to come out of your comfort zone, even if you feel that you might be judged by a loved one, by a friend, by a family member, which is never the case. Like, they'll never judge you. If they truly love you, if they truly love you unconditionally, they'll never judge you. But sometimes you still have that fear that they might judge me, or I might come across as a loser. Like, I'm supposed to be this macho guy, this strong guy, this hero. Like, how can I come across as weak? But I think there's a lot of strength in displaying weakness. What I also do, although I've become much better at it, and I alluded to this at the start of the conversation, is I find a lot of comfort in food. Because I don't end up going to people to actually talk about my issues or vent out my frustrations, I end up finding comfort in the form of food, in the form of comfort food. Like, food for the longest time was, and perhaps still is to some extent, my best friend whenever I feel down and out. I just eat as much as possible until I've numbed the pain. I've numbed the negative emotions or the painful emotions that I'm bottling. But I've become a lot better at this. And as the podcast progresses towards the end of the podcast, I'm going to be talking about some of the ways in which I've become better as well. Something else that I've been trying to do, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so successfully, is channelize my sadness or channelize my anger or channelize whatever negative emotions that I might be harboring in a constructive way. You know, the law of conservation of energy says that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but it can be transformed from one form to another. In other words, you can actually transform negative energy into something positive, into something more constructive. Anger, for example, you know, कभी कभी जब गुस्सा आ रहा होता है, you're like, मैं करके दिखाऊंगा, and you end up doing it. I came across a tweet from Robert Greene, who's one of my favorite authors. Not that I've read too many books written by people other than Robert Greene, and so by default that makes him my favorite author. Robert Greene tweeted saying, the best revenge is massive success. So sometimes you could be feeling hard done by, you could be angry, you could be feeling resentful towards someone because you feel that, oh, you know, you've been cheated by that person, or that person isn't quite giving you what you reckon you deserve, or that person's just been a dick to you, that can sometimes galvanize you to do your very best. The best revenge is massive success. David Goggins does something similar as well. So I recently came across a video of his on Chris Williamson's podcast, the Modern Wisdom podcast. And I learned through that video that David Goggins has created a mixtape of insults from the internet, and he listens to those when he's running. So he gets lots of these hate comments on the internet from a lot of people. He created a mixtape of those insults and those hate comments, and he listens to them while he's running. So whenever he feels that he doesn't have any more gas or energy left in the tank and he can't run any further, he'll motivate himself by listening to that mixtape of internet hate comments and insults that is created. Now, what I'll say is, as a caveat, that negative emotions, anger, they shouldn't become your primary source of motivation, because at the end of the day, these are extrinsic sources of motivation. It's fine to use them, it's fine to tap into them when you're lacking intrinsic motivation, but you can't be overly reliant on external sources or extrinsic motivation to get you going. But there are times when you're lacking intrinsic motivation and you can channelize that negative energy or that negative emotion into something a lot more positive, into something a lot more constructive. And just one more thing to add, I'm no saint. And sometimes what you need is a good wank or a tub of ice cream. But I like having a wank, or I like treating myself to a wank or treating myself to a tub of ice cream when I'm in good headspace, as opposed to doing so when I'm in bad headspace. Because when you're in good headspace and you choose to indulge in something unhealthy, you're making a rational choice. You choose to do that, hence I'm doing that. So there's no conflict in your head. There's no conflict stemming from any disparity or any deviation between what you should be doing and what you're actually doing. Because you've made a very conscious decision. Yes, today I will indulge. Today I'll have a wank. So I like doing so when I'm in good headspace. Because when you're doing it, when you're in bad headspace, then you feel guilty about having done so. Because when you're in bad headspace, your emotions are all over the place. And so your emotions drive you towards making a bad decision, although you feel the rational part of your brain is telling you that no, this is not something you should be doing. So then there's a conflict between, oh, I should be doing this, but I'm actually doing this. And that self-conflict very quickly degenerates to self-misery. And that's one of the reasons why you feel guilty in the aftermath of doing an action that you felt you shouldn't have been doing, but you still ended up doing so. I'll give you a quick example. Think about cheat meals. A planned cheat meal never makes me feel guilty. When I tell myself, no, today I will treat myself to a massive pizza and desserts, I don't feel guilty because I've planned that. I made a very conscious decision, a rational decision, that this is what I feel is the best thing to do. So there's no conflict between what I feel I should be doing and what I'm actually doing. I feel I should be doing this and I'm doing this. But an unplanned cheat meal, it could give you pleasure while you're actually cheating, while you might be doing so to numb your emotions. But in the aftermath, when you wake up the following morning after having smashed a large pizza that was unplanned the previous night, you end up feeling a bit guilty because of that conflict between what I felt I should have been doing versus what I actually ended up doing. Now, in both cases, you've still consumed the same number of calories. In both cases, you've still smashed the same pizza and the same desserts. But one leaves you with a slightly guilty feeling where you feel a bit down and out, a bit crestfallen, regretting your actions to some extent, while the other doesn't leave you with any negative feelings. You're happy. I enjoyed that cheat meal because I wanted to cheat. I wanted to have that cheat meal. You see how beautiful that is? You've done the same thing in both cases, But the result, in terms of how you feel in the aftermath of having done the same action, is different in this case versus what the case is in this case. We've been talking a lot about eating, and so I think it's a beautiful segue to talking about my tendency to emotionally eat. Different people have different ways in which they actually numb their emotions. There are healthy ways to do so, like meditation, talking to someone, but it's easier said than done. In the heat of the moment, when you're getting carried away by emotions, when your emotions are running wild, it's very difficult to make a rational choice. It's very difficult to do the right thing, the healthy thing. And so in college, when I was putting in the hard yards, when I was barely sleeping because of the demands of my engineering degree, because of how ultra ambitious I was to do well academically, maintain my 4.0 GPA, and also do well on the extracurriculars front, there was a lot of stress that I was experiencing. And in a bid to numb that stress, I was resorting to food, alcohol, marijuana, cigarettes, like all of these substances on a weekly basis, or sometimes multiple times a week as well. The unhealthiest of food, comfort foods, Taco Bell all day long, alcohol, marijuana, cigarettes. I used to finish a pack in 1.5 days. Not too proud of that. But when I was in college, my one overwhelming desire was to just maintain my 4.0 GPA, make sure that I end up getting good internships, a good full time job, and do well on the extracurriculars front. So, indulging in all of those items, like the food, alcohol, marijuana, cigarettes, didn't really create too much conflict in me because I didn't care about my health. I didn't feel as if, oh, this is what I should be doing, but this is what I'm doing. That conflict wasn't there. But now, in addition to, of course, wanting to do well professionally with my creative endeavors, I also care a lot about my health. And so if I end up going overboard with any of these substances, now it does create that conflict. But now I've become a lot more mindful in moments of stress. And I don't know how that's happened. I think maybe with age, you just become a bit more mindful. When you've had negative experiences in the past, you become wiser, you become a lot more sagacious, which, by the way, is one of the words of the day that I'm going to be talking about later. You become more prudent, you learn from your experiences. Carl Jung once said, no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach all the way down to hell. In other words, sometimes you need to have a hellish experience to experience what heaven feels like, to become a lot wiser. And so I've become a lot more mindful in moments of stress. It's not that now I don't feel the urge to eat, to comfort myself, to eat even when I'm not hungry, only because I might be bottling up certain emotional feelings that I want to numb. I still feel that way. But I don't necessarily always act in response to those feelings. In other words, I have been able to create a gap between the trigger or the urge and the reaction to that trigger or that urge. And I think that's what mindfulness is, being aware of the fact that you're feeling this trigger or this urge, but you don't necessarily have to impulsively or mindlessly react to that trigger or that urge. You create some space, you create some distance between the urge and your reaction to that urge. And so something simple yet very difficult to carry out that's been helping me immensely is just giving myself 10 minutes. I tell myself, Anubhav, okay, you're feeling this urge right now. I'm aware or cognizant of the fact that I'm feeling this urge. I'm mindful of the fact that I'm feeling this urge, but I don't have to react now. I'll wait for 10 minutes, just 10 minutes. At the end of those 10 minutes, if I still feel that urge, then I could choose to perhaps react to that urge. But for these 10 minutes, I'll just sit patiently. And trust me, it's only 10 minutes on paper, but those 10 minutes feel like an eternity. But this is also something that's called urge surfing. You can look it up. It's called urge surfing, where you're aware of your urge, but you're simply riding it out. You're surfing the urge, you're riding it out for just 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And more often than not, 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, you'll see that at the end of those 10 or 15 minutes, the magnitude of that urge or the strength of that urge has gone down. It's declined. It's waned in terms of its intensity. And you no longer feel like reacting to that urge. You feel, like eventually in just a few minutes, that urge will completely subside. It's difficult, as I said, because you have to be very patient. Those 10 minutes seem like an eternity. And I wish I could show that much patience when I'm in bed, as opposed to lasting for just a few seconds when I'm in bed. But that's something you could try out. Just wait it out, just ride the urge for 10 minutes, and you'll see the intensity of the urge has declined. The other thing that's helped me a lot is not being too hard on myself. Even if I've actually succumbed to the temptation or succumbed to the urge and I've reacted to it and I've binged or I've stuffed myself with food, chocolates, and comfort food, I've learned not to be too hard on myself. Earlier, I used to completely beat myself up over it. तू कैसे कर सकता था? Idiot, loser, don't even have this much self-control or willpower. But I realized that there are lots of people who do this. Like, I'm not the only one who does this. And so, Anubhav, don't be too hard on yourself. If you're hard on yourself, then you'll feel even worse. And when you feel even worse, you'll end up resorting to comfort food just so that you can actually feel better about yourself. And so that actually ends up backfiring when you're too hard on yourself, because it creates more negativity. And then you reach out for food to numb that negativity or to cancel that negativity, albeit temporarily. And so you end up creating this very vicious cycle of doing the act, beating yourself up, feeling massive regret, but then repeating the process again just so that you can actually numb that regret or numb the negative emotions that you might be feeling. I came across a video of, or maybe an article that I read of Thomas Tuchel, former Chelsea manager. Even if you don't know anything about Chelsea or Thomas Tuchel or football, it's okay. But Thomas Tuchel, in that article, talked about, I think the interviewer had asked Thomas Tuchel, how do you react to a defeat? When your team loses, what's your reaction like? And because of how obsessive a winner he is, in other words, because of how bad a loser he is, someone who can't really take defeat well, he comes back home once the match is over, his team's lost, and he'll spend the entire night analyzing the match. He'll watch the entire game again, think about what he could have done differently, tactically, what his players could have done differently, what went wrong, and how he can rectify this going forward. Because of how obsessed he is. But then he does that while eating a boatload of chocolates, just to comfort himself as he's going through the pain of watching his team lose or watching how the result didn't quite transpire his way. So when you know there are others in the same boat as you are, it feels a bit better. Not because you like gloating over someone else's misfortune, but the simple reason being that misery loves company. It feels therapeutic knowing that I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who's fucked up. There are others as well who are in the same boat as I am. So don't be too hard on yourself. And my gym trainer told me something very simple yet very profound that's had like an indelible impact on me when it comes to my emotional eating tendency, or when it comes to being less hard on myself. There was this one time I was at the gym, and I was talking to him, and he was asking me, training kaisi chal rahi hai, what do you feel about your fitness? And I told him, देखो training तो ठीक चल रही है, but I've just been eating a bit unhealthy. Whenever I'm stressed, I end up eating too much or end up overeating. And then he looks at me and he tells me, boss, at least you overeat. You don't overdo alcohol, cigarettes, and hard drugs that a lot of other people do. तो खाना ही तो खाता है ना extra. It could be much worse. You could be going overboard with alcohol, hard drugs, cigarettes, which probably have a much more pernicious effect on you than overeating food does. And so that changed me a lot. It left a very indelible impact on me. That, हाँ भाई, people do much worse. Anubhav, don't be so hard on yourself. You don't necessarily have to be such a hyper perfectionist. But I know emotional eating, it's a topic that's close to the bone, and not too many people want to open up about this, not too many people want to talk about this. And so what I'll do is I'll create a full episode on my binge eating, emotional eating tendencies, and how I've become a lot better now when it comes to my relationship with food compared to what I was like earlier. I've tried not keeping tempting foods in my house, not keeping those treats and temptations in my house. But that doesn't work. That's a mere band-aid. It could be a temporary fix, but it's not a permanent fix. Because an emotional eater, and if you're one, you'll be able to relate to what I'm saying. An emotional eater will run a marathon if need be to get his or her comfort foods. In other words, an emotional eater will go great lengths to source comfort food that's going to make him or her feel a lot better about himself or herself as a pick me up. And so, not having treats in your house could help in some cases, but that's not the permanent solution to it. The permanent solution is actually getting in touch with your emotions, which is very difficult. Very, very difficult. But I'll sum up this section of the podcast with that. And as I said, I'll create a full episode talking about my binge eating, my emotional eating, how I've become a lot better, because I actually think a lot of you might be able to benefit from it, because it's something that I've been struggling for years, and it's been a journey. I'm a lot better now compared to what I was like. I'm not fully cured, but I'm so much better now compared to what I was like. That's because I never gave up. Every time something went wrong, I went back to the drawing board thinking, okay, why did this go wrong? What can I do better? What can I do differently next time? And because of this process of fucking up, then going back to the drawing board, thinking about what I could do better, this process that I've carried out for God knows how many years now, like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, I've become a lot better now compared to what I was like. But it's not been easy. There have been times when I've thought about throwing in the towel. But I'm so glad that I actually kept at it in my bid to actually find a solution. So what am I currently reading at the moment? So I talked about this book. I am rereading, I should say, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. I don't think there's any book that I've actually read more than once, because I'm very impatient. I get bored very easily. And so I want new sources of stimulation as opposed to the same source of stimulation. But this is the only book that I've read multiple times. It's the third time that I'm reading this book. Beautiful, because it has so much wisdom and practical philosophy loaded in just 200 odd pages. It's a compilation of the best tweets, the best articles, the best snippets from podcasts that Naval Ravikant has been on about life, about wealth, happiness, all of those things. And this book, reading this book when I'm down and out, especially reading the section on happiness, is so therapeutic. Just 15 pages or 15 minutes of reading feels much better, makes me feel much better, acts as a beautiful pick-me-up. And the other book that I'm reading, because I'm a sports junkie, as some of you know, is a book called Coaching Beyond by R. Sridhar. R. Sridhar, the former fielding coach of Team India. I've actually had the pleasure working with him as well. We did a stint together for Sony Sports when I was working for Sony earlier this year, covering the India-Zimbabwe series, India-Ireland series, India-England series. That's when I spoke with him. I sent him a message as well on WhatsApp telling him that I'm reading this book and how much I've enjoyed the first few pages. When I say the first few pages, I've only read about 20-25 pages, but it's been a very good read so far. So I definitely look forward to continuing to read R. Sridhar's autobiography, Coaching Beyond, My Days with the Indian Cricket Team. And I'm hoping that I can actually bring him on for a podcast episode as well. It's going to be lovely hearing stories from him about what his days were like in the Indian cricket team, when he was in the same dressing room as the likes of MS Dhoni, Virat Kohli, Ravi Shastri, Rishabh Pant, and what have you. Lastly, words that I've learned this week. So 5 words: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Words that I've learned this week. The first word is a word that I've used on this podcast already, on this podcast episode already, is the word sagacious. The meaning of the word sagacious is wise, intelligent, prudent. So you describe someone as sagacious when that person shows good judgment, especially in the context of making decisions. A sagacious leader is an example. A sagacious purchase of stock. You made a good decision purchasing a particular stock that's done well for you. You call it a sagacious purchase of stock. Now, when can you use sagacious? So I've told myself that I'm going to be using the word sagacious instead of two or three commonly used words such as wise, prudent, intelligent. These are words that I use very commonly: wise, prudent, intelligent. And so now my brain has formed an association between the word sagacious and the words wise, prudent, intelligent, which are words that I commonly use. And so the next time I feel like describing someone or something as wise, prudent, intelligent, my brain might just nudge me to use the sexier alternative or the sexier synonym, sagacious, instead, because of this association that I formed between sagacious and the words that I said: wise, prudent, intelligent. So that's the first word that I learned on Monday. The second word that I learned on Tuesday is the word platonic. Now you might say, Anubhav, that's a word that we all know the meaning of. But funnily enough, I came across this word for the first time 2 months or 3 months back when I was having a conversation with a friend, and she was describing a relationship that she has as a platonic relationship. I've come across that word before, but I didn't know the meaning of platonic. And so I looked up the meaning. Platonic is a platonic relationship is an intimate and affectionate relationship, but one that's non-sexual or one that's non-physical. Basically, you like a girl, you end up striving for her, you end up getting friend zoned, and then you have to settle for a platonic relationship. So from a guy's perspective, that's what platonic relationship is. And something else that I read when I was doing some research on the word platonic and when I was looking up the meaning is that platonic actually stems from Plato, the philosopher Plato, because Plato believed that the love between two people can be so strong that it transcends physical attachments. So that's where platonic comes from Plato's belief that the love between two people can be so strong that it transcends physical attachments. Plato, you beauty, you beauty. The third word is the word pithy. What does pithy mean? The word pithy means something that's short and sweet, but still has a lot of meaning, has a lot of substance. It's tersely cogent. It's terse, or it's short, it's concise, it's brief, but still has a lot of substance and meaning. So a proverb, that's pithy. Any aphorism or any saying can be described as pithy. So examples being a pithy comment, a pithy remark, a pithy advice. So something that comprises just a few words, not too many, but still has a lot of substance, a lot of meaning. The fourth word on my list is the word duplicitous. I came across this word when while watching something on TalkSport. Simon Jordan on TalkSport, I think he's a brilliant orator. I might not agree with all his opinions on football, but I think he's a brilliant orator. Used the word duplicitous. I liked it. I made a note of it. I looked up the meaning of duplicitous. And duplicitous means you describe someone as duplicitous when that person is two-faced, hypocritical, when that person is deceitful. That's a duplicitous person. Someone who pats you on the back with one hand, but then picks your pocket with the other. A two-faced person. So you could describe a politician as being a duplicitous politician. So someone who says one thing, but does something totally different. As a result of which that person cannot be trusted, or that person cannot be taken at face value. That's the word duplicitous. And the last word that's on my list, the fifth and final word, is the word impassive. So impassive is generally used to describe a person's face. And a person's face is described as impassive when that face is expressionless, when that person has a straight face, poker face, when that person isn't showing any emotions. So you can use it to describe someone who's stoic, who's very cool, calm, composed, phlegmatic. Now, just because someone's showing an impassive face doesn't mean that person does not feel any emotions. That person still might be feeling emotions, but it's just that that person's face does not betray those emotions that that person is feeling. So that person has a very straight face, a poker face, expressionless or emotionless. So that's it. I've covered everything on that I had planned for this podcast. If you have any questions, just like Johnson did, please send them over to anubhavjain0712 at gmail.com. Send them to me in audio or video form, preferably, such that we can get as cozy and intimate as possible. Instead of actually having to read out your question, I'd love to play your question, either the audio form or the video form of the question. So, Johnson, thank you so much for sending in a question in video form. And I'd love for you guys to do something similar as well in the event that you guys have any questions that you feel unqualified to answer. And lastly, I loved this chat. I absolutely loved it. And nothing makes me feel more alive than having genuine, organic conversations with you guys, albeit through a lens. Imagine how much fun it would be to do this in person. But even when I'm talking to you through a lens, I'm enjoying it thoroughly. Nothing makes me feel more alive than having such conversations with you guys. I think there's a reason why I call it the Conversation Junkie podcast. So hopefully on this episode, I've done justice to the name, the Conversation Junkie. And I really look forward to doing justice to this in future episodes as well. And just so you know, along with solo episodes like this one, I'm going to be bringing on guests on the podcast as well. So I'm incredibly excited for what's in store. I just have to keep at it, be consistent, but I'll do so if I'm enjoying the process. And of course, if you're benefiting from it. So let me know if you benefited from this episode. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to my channel, share this video with a friend or a family member who you think will benefit from it. Drop a comment for the algorithm. And I'd love for you guys to give me company in future episodes as well. That's it for today. Cheers, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.